Welcome back to our series, 2018 Code, a challenge and an opportunity. I'm Peter Yost of Building Right. Today I will talk about different types of insulation and where it goes, how much insulation is required, and I will discuss the code's new approach to vapor retarders. I will also talk about the importance of looking at those pesky footnotes. Insulation is all about slowing down heat, either out of our homes in the winter or into our homes in the summer. Sounds pretty simple. But for this video, I went around our home and added up all the different types of insulation. In our vented attic, we have cotton batts. The batts are blue, by the way, because the batts are made from recycled blue jeans. Next up is the closed cell spray foam we use to insulate our first floor concrete block walls from the outside. Our kitchen and mudroom addition is all structurally insulated panels or SIP construction for the floor, the walls, and the roof. In our basement, we use open cell spray foam on the interior of the concrete walls. On the second floor, which is wood framed, we used fiberglass batts in the cavities and extruded polystyrene rigid insulation continuous on the exterior. And then a couple of years ago, I added another course of batt insulation in the attic crisscrossed, this time opting for mineral wool batts. So I count 7 different types of insulation. Maybe not so simple after all. Let's see what we can figure out from the new 2018 code and its insulation requirements. Some basics first. We all know there are 3 ways that heat moves around. Radiation, that's energy moving at the speed of light through empty space from high temperature to low temperature surfaces. This type of heat transfer is most important for our windows. The second form of heat flow is convection. This is energy moving through fluids, liquids, and gases. This type of heat transfer is most important in terms of air leakage. And then finally, there's conduction. This is energy moving through solids and is most important in our insulation. These 3 forms of heat transfer get translated into building heat gain and loss, with windows being dominated by radiant heat transfer, air leakage representing convection, and insulation managing conduction. Insulation is all about slowing down conductive heat flow through our walls and roof. We measure conductive heat flow as British thermal units, BTUs, moving through 1 square foot of material or an assembly in 1 hour for each 1 degree temperature difference between the inside and outside. A BTU is a very small amount of heat, about the same amount as a kitchen matchstick when it burns. We call this conductive heat flow the U value of a material. On the left is a square foot of extruded polystyrene insulation. You know, the XPS pink or blue stuff. At a 1 degree Fahrenheit temperature difference from one side of the XPS to the other, only 0.2 BTUs move through in 1 hour. On the right is a square foot of cast concrete. At the same 1 degree Fahrenheit temperature difference from one side to the other of the concrete, 12 BTUs move through the concrete in 1 hour. So the U value for the XPS insulation is 0.2, and for the concrete, it's 12. But we also measure and use R value in our industry. R value is the resistance to conductive heat flow of a material or an assembly. The relationship between U value and R value is reciprocal, or 1 over the other. R equals 1 over U. So taking the same 2 examples of XPS insulation in concrete, 1 over 0.2 equals R5 for 1 inch of XPS, and 1 over 12 or R.083 for concrete. Almost all insulation relies on trapping gas to slow the heat flow. The main way to increase the effect of trapping gas is to make the gas pockets as small as possible. On the left is a representation of expanded polystyrene insulation. You know, that's the white rigid board insulation. The gas pockets are quite small, but since EPS is quite a bit of open cell, its R value is just 3.85 per inch. On the right is a representation of phenolic foam rigid insulation. The gas pockets in this rigid insulation are much smaller than the EPS rigid insulation, and the material is mostly closed cell. So its R value averages about 7, nearly double that of EPS per inch. But why do we really need R values and U values? Do we really need both of them? Well, one reason we use both units of measure is this. You can add R values to get the total heat flow or resistance of an assembly, but you can't add U values. So in this photo, the walls and roof are insulated with 6 inches of fiberglass batt for an R value of 19. And the R value of the 1-inch XPS insulation is 5. We can add these together because they're R values for a total of R24. If we want to know the U value of the combined insulation materials, now we take the reciprocal of 24 and get a U value of 0.042 BTUs moving through the combined insulation of 1 square foot in 1 hour, given a temperature difference of 1 degree Fahrenheit. When we size heating systems, we need to know the U value. We need to know how much heat is moving into or out of our buildings. But R values are useful for adding up the performance of assemblies. And for our home buyers, it's way easier for them to follow the larger R value means better, rather than trying to explain to the same folks that the lower the U value, the better. Here is the second reason we need both values. We use heat flow, or U, not R, or resistance, to measure the performance of windows. I guess the window industry missed the memo on how much homeowners like R values. Note that on the window sticker in the upper left, it does not actually say U value, but U factor. The difference is that U factor is not for just the glass portion of the window, but also adding in the frame and spacers. So the U factor can change with the size and type of window, even if the exact same glass is used. Remember back when I said that the main way to slow conductive heat flow was to trap air? All the insulation materials on the left have this in common. They trap air, and the better that they trap the air and the smaller the traps, the better the R value. But what about windows? In the insulated glazing unit between the 2 panes of sealed glass, there's no air, but a special gas like argon or xenon or even krypton. Turns out the other way to slow heat flow is to choose a gas that has a different viscosity and convective movement than air. Those gases are a heck of a lot more expensive than air, but we need their special heat transfer performance in our windows. Wait, I thought we were talking about insulation in this video. Are windows insulation? Well, technically anything that slows heat transfer is considered insulation. And the double or triple paned insulated glazing units, or IGUs, in our modern windows are, well, they're insulated. So yes, think of windows as a special type of see-through insulation. And we need more than just U factors to describe the performance of windows, because radiant energy can move through the windows in addition to conductive heat flow. It gets tricky when we talk about radiant energy, because in Nebraska during the winter, we want a lot of solar gain through the windows. But then in the summer, we don't want that same solar heat gain. For more information on the performance of residential windows, the best resource is the Efficient Windows Collaborative, which includes a climate-tuned window selection tool. You can use the tool to identify the best performing windows for your climate. I set the window selection tool for a 1-story home in Omaha, and it selected a group of windows, including window 22 seen here, with the results showing all of the values we need to understand thermal performance, starting with the U factor. More on the other window labels coming right up. The heart of the building code's prescriptive insulation requirements are in the table shown here. Interesting that they group together insulation and fenestration. Fenestration means windows, skylights, and doors with glass. The whole table includes all climates, but since Nebraska is entirely in climate zone 5, I have only included that row. So starting on the left, we see 3 columns for fenestration, windows, skylights, and note that the solar heat gain coefficient, or SHGC, is NR, or not required. That means that in climate zone 5, with significant heating and cooling, you can use windows with any SHGC, or solar heat gain coefficient. The remaining columns are all about the thermal performance required for insulation or required R values. But there are all sorts of footnotes and slashes and multiple entries we need to decipher. Let's take the footnotes first, starting with basement insulation. So footnote C explains that 10/13 means that if you install continuous insulation on the interior or exterior of the foundation wall, the minimum R value is 10. If you choose to build a framed wall on the interior, meaning that the insulation is not continuous, you need at least R13 insulation in the framing cavities. Now, note that for the interior framed wall example, I chose an assembly from Building Science Corporation that included the stamp "Not Recommended." The reason for this warning is that it is quite common for builders who frame basement walls and insulate with fiberglass batts to include a 6mm polyethylene interior vapor retarder. While the code permits this configuration, it's not a good idea to include such an aggressive vapor retarder given all the moisture that works its way out of the concrete foundation wall over time. Now hold that thought regarding the relationship between types of insulation and vapor retarders. We're going to come back to that later. Is there anything else the building code says about foundation insulation? Yup. Section R303.2.1 says that you have to protect exterior rigid insulation with a rigid and weather-resistant covering. Whenever I see exterior rigid foundation insulation, it's almost always covered with a parge coat or stucco, not exactly rigid protection material. In fact, this is one of the most common questions I get about exterior foundation insulation. How the heck do we protect it over time, even just starting with how beat up it can get during construction? There are some proprietary products that include a rigid protective covering to the foundation insulation. This picture shows one from Nudo. But just about any cover material, along with the thickness of the exterior insulation, can cause planar problems when it comes up to meet the above grade wall. It's for these reasons that many high-performance building professionals prefer interior foundation insulation, but in terms of the code, you can put continuous insulation on either side of the foundation wall. Another foundation footnote to the table is about slab insulation, both perimeter and sub-slab for heated slabs. If your slab is heated, you need R10 perimeter insulation down to a depth of 2 feet and R5 sub-slab in climate zone 5. Hence, that's how you get the 10,2. Footnote G in the prescriptive table is about exposed floor assemblies like the addition floor shown here. In climate zone 5, the assembly needs to be a minimum of R30. However, if your floor assembly is not deep enough to achieve R30, and you cannot achieve R30 with any other type of insulation, it must be a minimum of completely filled insulation to an R value of 19. So what if the depth of the floor is not enough for a full R30 of insulation? You can see here that the depth of the floor framing is likely not enough to fit in R30 insulation, so the code provides some wiggle room for just this case. Almost done with footnotes here, but here's footnote H, and it's about the insulation performance for above grade framed walls, and it states 20 or 13 plus 5. In this diagram, on the left, the wall framing is deep enough to get the required R20 entirely in the cavity. But the code also permits just R13 in the frame cavity if you also use R5 continuous insulation on the exterior of the wall. That's the middle example in this image. On the right, we have an alternative wall panel that reverses the location of the structural sheathing and the continuous rigid insulation. Either configuration meets the code. Since we began using vapor retarders in the late 1930s and early 40s, the issue has seemed to create more questions than answers. The new building code clears up any confusion by connecting the performance of insulation with vapor retarders. No small part of the confusion is all the different materials that qualify as vapor retarders. First up is asphalt impregnated craft paper facing on a fiberglass batt. That craft paper qualifies as a vapor retarder per the code. Next, we have foil-faced rigid polyisocyanurate insulation. The aluminum foil facing also qualifies as a vapor retarder per the code. Finally, we have a very new vapor retarder called membrane. It's a sheet good, clear plastic. It also meets the code as a vapor retarder. The code used to state that a vapor retarder was anything less than 1 perm, and yes, all 3 of the examples meet that. But there is a whole range of vapor performance besides just less than 1 perm. The new code has a completely new approach to vapor retarders. Chapter 7 of the IRC, the International Residential Code, addresses wall coverings on the interior. Section R702 addresses what kind of vapor retardant is required on the interior of exterior walls. The new section on vapor retarders includes 3 different classes of vapor retarder. Class 1 is the most restrictive to vapor movement at 0.1 perms or less. Common building materials that are Class 1 vapor retarders include solid aluminum foil and 6mm poly, another common vapor retarder material. Class 2 is the middle of the 3 new classes. Class 2 materials are between 0.1 and 1 perm. Craft face paper batts fall into this class. Class 3 vapor retarders are the least restrictive to vapor movement, 1 to 10 perms. Latex paint and the membrane pictured previously are Class 3 retarders. Note that the prescriptive code requires that the default or base case for cold climates, like Nebraska, is a Class 1 or 2 vapor retarder. When do you get to use the Class 3 vapor retarder and why? This graphic includes more materials and more information on vapor permeance. One thing in this graphic not included in the previous image is that some materials have a wide range of perm values depending upon how wet they are. Why are we interested in different classes of vapor retarder, and why would we be interested in materials that have a range of values? For example, the bottom yellow arrow is for membrane or nylon. It's called a smart vapor retarder because it has variable vapor permeability, moving from nearly a Class 2 retarder to vapor open. The key to all this is that the code now recognizes that while we may want some restriction to vapor getting into our building assemblies during the winter, we are just as interested as the building assemblies being able to dry the rest of the year. Table R702.7.1 is all about these Class 3 vapor retarders. So in this table, note that the first column is for climate zones on the left. The second column gives the conditions for which Class 3 vapor retarders can be used. So let's blow up the row for climate zone 5. It states there are 2 things you can do so that you can use Class 3 interior vapor retarders. Let's focus on the 2 rows regarding exterior insulated sheathing. So you get to use the least restrictive Class 3 vapor retarder for either 2x4 or 2x6 walls if you do a minimum R5 sheathing for 2x4 and R7.5 for 2x6 walls. Why? The key to this change is that continuous exterior insulation warms the framing cavity. So in this first image, there is no exterior continuous insulation. So on a cold winter night, the temperature of the structural sheathing goes down to about 9 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, that is really cold, and that means that any moisture in the framing cavity will condense on that cold sheathing. Never a good thing. Now, we could just put a Class 1 vapor retarder to keep that wintertime moisture out of the wall. But what happens if we add continuous exterior insulation? So this exterior insulation warms the framing cavity, and you can see that the sheathing warms all the way up to 35 degrees Fahrenheit. That's way warmer. The logic is that this warming means we can relax the vapor retarder to a Class 3, and that means that in the seasons other than winter, vapor can actually escape to the interior of the building. This is key. Class 3 vapor retarders in cold climates increase drying potential. The building code is actually connecting thermal and moisture performance, which building scientists have been advocating for years. The key to building science is that heat and moisture flows are always acting together, and so we must address them both and not individually. But what about these flash and batt insulation systems? Do they provide the same drying benefit as continuous exterior insulation, warming the cavity? You can see in this diagram that the structural sheathing is quite cold, nearly the same temperature as outdoors. But the temperature at the interior surface of the spray foam is quite warm. Since the spray foam insulation is airtight and a Class 2 vapor retarder, it warms the rest of the framing cavity enough to allow a Class 3 interior vapor retarder. And note that just as the ratio of R values for the exterior and cavity insulation is critical, So is the R value ratio of the spray foam flash and air and vapor permeable batt insulation. Okay, the building science seems right, but what about the building code? Once again, it's the building code table footnotes to the rescue. Footnote A is all about addressing the flash and batt system. Footnote A states that if the spray foam installed has a vapor permeance of 1.5 or less, and you maintain the R value ratios, it's just as acceptable as the exterior continuous insulation. You can see the flash and batt system in this photo. Closed cell spray foam in each framing cavity with the appropriate fiberglass batt installed to the interior of the foam. So what's the advantage of this system? Well, you get increased air tightness from the spray foam, and most of the framing cavity is filled with the much less expensive fiberglass batt. Okay, so exterior insulation and flash and batt walls work in cold climates. What about unvented roofs? Table R806.5 has 2 columns per usual, climate zone on the left, and the minimum R value of the top side or continuous exterior rigid insulation on the right. If either your exterior rigid insulation or your flash is R20, then the remaining interior insulation can be air permeable, like a fiberglass batt. And note that no Class 1 retarder is required. In fact, it's not even allowed. That is to allow drying to the interior of the roof assembly. So you can see the shift, right? Not just restricting moisture getting into the assembly during the winter, but it's all about as well drying potential. So this roof cross section here shows the flash and batt unvented roof for a climate zone 6 application. See how the R values of the air impermeable spray foam and air permeable fiberglass satisfy the building code table for condensation control. For your slightly milder climate zone 5 in Nebraska, the minimum R values of both types of insulation are a bit less, but the ratio is similar. So we have covered how the new code sets the baseline for insulation, but what about going above code? I do a lot of trainings with architect Steve Basic. We both worked for Building Science Corporation in the early 2000s. He created this graphic, which he calls the proportionate gears. Steve thinks each of these building elements, windows, space conditioning systems, insulation, and airtightness, he thinks of them as interconnected gears. The gears keep the performance level of each element proportionate. Care must be taken to keep the balance between each of these elements. For example, if you're going to significantly increase your insulation levels, will that still make sense with the performance of your windows? So the answer to the right level of above code insulation requires that you understand and assess the performance of your windows, your heating and cooling systems, and how airtight your building is. The primary tool for connecting these gears is usually energy modeling. Energy models can vary from pretty simple to quite complex, but they all allow you to connect these gears to keep your performance levels proportionate. So Steve takes this concept across climates and across project budgets. Here is Steve's Basic's slider cross-section. The basic configuration is, starting from the outside, some thickness of exterior continuous insulation, then an appropriate level of air impermeable cavity insulation, then completing the level of air permeable cavity insulation, and lastly, either a Class 3 retarder, per the code, or a smart vapor retarder, one that can adjust its vapor permeability based upon its moisture content. This slide comes from each insulation component increasing or decreasing based on climate and client budget. His wall framing slides as well, moving from 2x4 to 2x8. Here's an image of one of Steve's homes in Climate Zone 5 using the slider approach. You can be sure that it exceeds local code, but not his client's budget. Maybe the not recommended stamp makes more sense now. The polyethylene vapor barrier is a Class 1 vapor retarder on the interior, and it does not allow drying of the foundation wall to the interior. Additionally, we worry about wintertime moisture getting into framed assemblies that are above grade, because framed assemblies are much more susceptible to moisture gain than concrete. Concrete can take on moisture and not be affected like a framed wood wall would be. The other thing is that the temperature difference inside to out in the winter in the basement is way less than the temperature difference in above grade portions of the building. As the building code turns more to science, so must we as building professionals. Our federal government has taken more than 20 years of residential building research and collected that information and work into the Building America Solution Center. It is an outstanding resource for both code and beyond code home building. Shown here is an award-winning high-performance home by Nags Construction in Kearney, Nebraska. The case study goes into all of the technical details of this home and its performance. Check out the Building America Solution Center for climate-tuned building details and results. So just a bit of a wrap-up here. Insulation drives energy efficiency, but it only makes sense if it's accomplished in connection to moisture management and air tightness. There are many ways to insulate a building well. Quality of installation drives any insulation's performance. The new building codes are connecting moisture and thermal performance. It's not just a good idea, it's driven by science. Don't forget code footnotes. They often contain key information. Insulation is just one of 4 elements that drives performance. Make your insulation performance proportionate to your window, mechanical systems, and air tightness performance. Thanks for watching our series on the 2018 code. We hope you will see the code change as an opportunity to connect moisture management, air sealing, and insulation, and to build more energy efficient and durable buildings.